So, dear learners, I would like to welcome you all to this module, that is module 9, in which we will discuss about the non-tariff barriers. So, we have already discussed the different kinds of barriers which are basically broadly classified as tariff and non-tariff barriers. Regarding tariff barriers, which are extensively discussed in module 8. So in this module, basically, we will discuss about what are the non-tariff barriers which restricts international trade. So as already explained in our previous modules, although different countries across the globe participate in international trade to gain from trade, but the problem is that they used to apply different kinds of restriction in terms of tariff and non-tariff barriers to benefit their exporters or domestic producers. Now, in this lecture, that is basically in Unit 1, that is Objectives of Import Quotas, we will discuss about how import quotas is imposed by the importing countries to restrict trade. Now, the definition of import quotas can be given as an import quota is a common imposed limit on the quantity, or you can say the value of a specific product that can be imported into a country during a given period. So we can say typically a year. So what happened? Unlike tariff, which impose taxes on imported goods, import quotas place a direct restriction on the volume of goods that can enter the domestic market. So instead of rate, import quotas give restriction on volume. So the purpose of import quotas is to obviously to regulate trade by controlling the amount of certain products that are allowed to cross borders. So that is why this restriction can be used to protect domestic industries. That is one of them. It can also be used to reduce trade deficit, and it is also used to safeguard the national security and meet other economic and political goals. Quota can apply to a wide range of goods, including agricultural products, manufactured items, and natural resources. And as I have already told you, it is basically used so that domestic industries can be protected, and it is also used to reduce trade deficit and to safeguard national security and other economic and political goals. So import quotas are, if you see the empirical examples, the import quotas are often enforced through various mechanisms. If you see the mechanism, if you consider the mechanisms such as licensing system or specific quotas allotted to its exporting country, which may be adjusted annually. So these quotas can either be, it can be a global, which is applicable to all the importing countries. It is not specific, or it can be country specific, where a particular limit is placed on goods from certain nations. So that is why import quotas can be either global or country specific. Now, since we are talking about import quotas, it is necessary to know the origin of import quotas, how it is evolved as an important non-tariff barriers over the years. Now, if you see the history of import quotas, the history of import quotas can be traced back to the early 20th century as nations began to seek ways to protect their industries and manage economic relations. So what we can do to know the evolving of import quotas over the years, we can divide the periods into different subgroups. So let us first consider the early 20th century. That is, precursor to protectionist measures. So before the widespread use of import quotas, countries often relied on tariff to regulate trade. However, by the early 1990s, if you see, the economic conditions such as rise of mass production increased competition and concern over survival of nations or infant industries led some nations to consider more direct form of trade control. So as a result, what happened? In this period, countries began experimenting with policies aimed at restricting import to protect domestic industries, particularly in sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. So as a result, although quotas were not yet to widespread tool, they were used occasionally, especially during the times of economic disasters, wars, or market imbalances. So this is the way how quotas are imported during early 20th century. Now next we will discuss about 1930s. This is the 1930s. This decade is basically known as the decade of Great Depression and rise of protectionism. So I think all of you know that during that period, that is 1930s, that is 1920 to 1930, these decades, or the whole world has experienced a Great Depression. That is, the depression is a phrase where there is a fall in prices of commodities due to lack of demand. So as a result, there is a fall in aggregate demand, which fall in aggregate demand will lead to fall in production. Fall in production again lead to decline in employment opportunities. Then decline in employment opportunities lead to fall in again income. So this process will go on until it leads to a Great Depression. So that decade is basically known as the Great Depression, and that lead to rise in protectionism. And import quota is a kind of instrument which can be used to protect the domestic producers from foreign competition. So the 1930s marked a pivotal point or significant point in the history of trade restriction, particularly as the world grappled with the effect of Great Depression. So as economics around the globe faced widespread unemployment, financial instability, and industrial collapse, many countries turned to protectionist policies, or many countries adopt protectionist policies to shield their economics from foreign competition. So during this period, import quotas began to gain prominence as governments sought to restrict foreign goods in favor of domestic production. They want to protect the domestic industry because they have already suffered due to their depression. They have already have low production, low income. So that is why government at that time, government of different countries, they realize the need to protect the domestic producer from further deterioration in their profit. So that is why they have used some kind of protectionist measure. So one notable example is example was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 in the United States. So which basically raised tariff on thousands of imported goods, but also included provision that indirectly promoted import restriction. So other countries also followed suit with the similar measures. Now, as I have already discussed, in non-tariff barriers are generally assumed that it is in addition to tariff barriers. Now, in addition to tariff, import quotas become a tool for government to control the amount of specific foreign goods entering their market, so further reducing competition, and that lead to stabilize local industries. So that is why the use of import quotas is seen as an effective tool to limit import without having to negotiate trade agreement and alter tariff during this period that we are now discussing. It is 1930s. Now, if you consider the next decade, that is 1940s to 1950s, that is a post-war trade and formation of international trade institution. So what happened after World War II? The global economy began to recover, and trade between nations started to increase because it is after war situation, and as a result, there is some kind of stability in the overall. Globally, there is some kind of stability, and as a result, what happened? The economy recovered, and trade between the nations started to grow. So, however, what happened? Many countries, what they did, they still maintain import quotas as part of their trade policy, particularly for for sensitive sectors like agriculture and textiles. So this the international community also began to recognize the potential negative effect of protectionist measures, including quotas, on global trade. So that is why if you see that there are two trends. One, what many countries, although there is trade started to go, but many countries still maintain import quotas as a part of their trade policy. But at the same time, the international community also recognize the potential negative effect of protectionist measures. So as a result, what happened in 1947? The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, which is basically known as GATT, was established to promote international trade and reduce barriers to free flow of goods and services. So that is why the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, which was introduced or implemented in 1947, sought to create a multilateral framework where countries could negotiate tariff reduction and other trade restriction, including quotas, so that trade international the volume of international trade can increase, and which will lead to prosperity to all the nations involved in international trade. So this agreement called for the reduction of import quotas and tariff to foster free trade. There should be free trade, so that free trade with minimal or no restriction in terms of tariff and non-tariff barriers, which will ultimately lead to the gain from trade to distribute it among different countries, and all the countries will be benefited. That is basically what the General Agreement of Tariff and Trade try to give message to the nations. So basically, in the areas like agriculture, textile, steel, where domestic industries were deemed domestic industries may not produce sufficient amount of those goods, and those goods can be imported from others, which will benefit both the countries. Now, if you see the next two decades, that is 1960s to 1980s, we can term it as a quota system and the multi-fiber agreement. So what happened in this time? That throughout the mid 20th century, import quotas were commonly used in many developed countries to protect domestic industries, which I have already discussed. So this was particularly true in industries where large differences in producing cost existed in between countries, such as textile, clothing, and agriculture. So as a result, what happened? In the 1970s, the multi-fiber agreement was created as an agreement between developed countries such as United States and European nations and developing nations, mainly in Asia, to impose quotas on the export of textile and clothing. So what happens next? Due to this, the multi-fiber agreement, because this multi-fiber agreement aimed to limit the influx of cheap textile goods from developing countries, particularly China, India, and others, to protect jobs in the textile industries of developed countries. So that is why the multi-fiber agreement remained in place until 2005, when it was, if you see during this period from 1970s to 2005, it was remain in place to protect the textile and clothing industry of the developed countries, which are flooded with cheap textile goods from developing countries such as China, India, and others. So that is why it was enforced between this period, and it was phrased out under the Agreement of Textile and Clothing, which is basically known as ATC, as part of the World Trade Organization reforms. Now, during this period, what happened? Countries also use quota in industries such as steel, dairy products, and agricultural commodities, where overproduction or surpluses in one country could hurt the economics of other countries. So import quotas in these cases were often negotiated as a part of bilateral agreement or between countries. Now, if you see, the latest the latest period, that is 1990s to present, that is basically the emergence of World Trade Organization and shifting of trade dynamics. So in 1995, we all know that the World Trade Organization replaced the GATT, that is General Agreement of Tariff and Trade, and become the main international body overseeing global trade rules. So what happened after formation of the World Trade Organization? The WTO sought to further liberalize international trade by reducing tariff and eliminate quotas. So as a part of, we can give the example, the Uruguay round of trade negotiation, the World Trade Organization pushed for gradual elimination of quotas, especially in sectors like textile and agriculture, where they have more commonly used, because it restricts the developing countries, or restrict the countries which have an comparative advantage in production of those commodities, where there is overproduction of textile and clothing, and due to the quota imposed by particularly by the developed countries, it put restriction on export of those goods. So, however, while the World Trade Organization promoted free trade, it also allowed countries to use specific quota or under certain circumstances. Now we can also give example. For example, you say countries were still allowed to impose quota as a response to anti-dumping measures. What is anti-dumping? We will not explain detail regarding what is dumping and what is anti-dumping. We will discuss those things in our next lecture. So what I want to emphasize, the World Trade Organization also, although they promote free trade, but it also allowed countries to use quotas in certain situations when they found that some countries or some exporting countries use some bad practices such as dumping to kill the competition. So that is why in those situations they can use quota system. So that is why, since the formation of the World Trade Organization, the use of import quota has generally decreased, particularly in industrialized countries, as global trade has become more interconnected and become more open after the formation of World Trade Organization. So nevertheless, import quotas are still utilized by some countries. It is still in very much utilized by many countries in specific sectors, particularly in sensitive industries, and may also employed in context of trade disputes and protectionist as a part of protectionist policy. Now, if you see the current use of import quotas in the modern, we can term it as in a modern global economy, import quotas are still used, but their prevalence has diminished compared to the earlier periods, which we have already discussed. So today's import quotas are more likely to impose, as a response to specific trade imbalance to protect strategic industries, or as part of bilateral agreement rather than a broad protectionist tool. So that is why in recent years, countries such as United States and the European Union have occasionally employed import quotas in sectors like steel, aluminium, and certain agricultural products in the name of national security or economic protectionism. So, for example, we can give the example, in 2018, the United States imposed tariff and quotas on steel and aluminium import from several countries, citing as a national security concern. So that is why, although the volume of import quotas, the prevalence of import quotas has decreased over the years, but it is very much in the field of international trade. So despite their reduced use in the face of global trade liberation, import quotas remained a relevant aspect of trade policy in certain contexts, particularly in the realm of political negotiation. diplomatic relation and effort to maintain domestic economic stability. Now, since we have already discussed the history of import quotas in terms of its emergence, its prevalence, and how it evolved, now we are in a position to discuss what are the specific objective of import quotas, which is the main purpose of this lecture. So, as I have already told you, import quotas are a form of trade restrictions that limit the quantity or value of product that can be imported into a country within a specified period. And unlike tariff, which are taxes imposed on import quotas impose a direct limit on the amount of good that can enter the nation. So that is why, from the above, we can, it is obvious that the primary goal of import quota is to regulate the flow of goods into the country and manage the balance of trade. So these quotas can be used by various regions for fulfilling various objectives, ranging from protecting domestic industries to fulfilling strategic, economic, political, and social objectives. So that's what I believe, we need to explore the objectives of import quotas, their impact on international trade, and the rationale behind their use. Now, I think we have already discussed. The first and the foremost objectives of import quotas is to protection of domestic industries. So one of the primary objective of import quotas is the protection of domestic industries from foreign competition. So by restricting the quantity or foreign goods entering a country, quotas give local businesses or local producers a chance to grow and maintain their market share. So this is especially relevant in industries where domestic producers are unable to compete effectively with foreign producers due to lower production cost, economies of scale, and technological advantages. So for example, you see in countries where with developing manufacturing sector, domestic industries may face struggle to compete with foreign producer who can offer goods at lower price due to lower labor cost or production cost. Now what happens? An import quota can limit the volume of cheaper import, thereby allowing local manufacturers to sell their products at higher prices and maintain profitability. So that is why the protection of nascent or infant industries, often referred as of infant industries, is one of the most cited justification for the implementation of import quotas, or you can say one of the most important objectives of imposing import quotas by different countries. Now, second most important objectives of import quotas is to preservation of domestic employment. So it is true that as a part of their duty, the government has to protect or increase the domestic employment. So that is why import quotas can serve to protect jobs within domestic industries. By restricting foreign import, a country can reduce the competitive pressure faced by the domestic producers, which can in turn help to preserve employment in key sectors. For example, if a domestic country faces stiff competition from the low-cost foreign import, it may be forced to reduce its workforce or even close down operations due to the inability to compete. So as a result, import quota can thus be seen as a tool for safeguarding jobs, especially in sectors that are labor intensive or critical to country's economy. So these objectives of imposing import quotas, that is preservation of domestic employment, is particularly important in times of economic downturn or during periods of high unemployment. So what happens? Government in those time, government may impose import quotas to support the struggling sectors, particularly those with significant labor forces, to avoid job losses and maintain political stability. Import quotas are imposed by the government in those situations. So this is especially crucial in industries like textile, steel, agriculture, automobile manufacturing, where these sectors are basically considered to be labor-intensive sectors, where even small fluctuation in international competition can lead to significant job losses. Now, the third one of the most important objectives of imposing import quotas is the enhancement of national security. So usually what happens, in some cases, if you observe, import quotas are used for national security reasons. Countries may, the countries have the heavy liberty to restrict the imposition of goods that are considered or deemed sensitive to national interests, such as military equipment, technologies with dual use application, those which those that can be used for both civilian and military purpose, or critical raw materials. So this is done to ensure that a country maintains control over essential supplies and is not dependent on potentially adversarial, which is considered as a potential adversarial nations for products crucial to its security. So, for example, we can give the example of certain high-tech product or military software may be subject to import quotas to ensure that these products are sourced from friendly nations, or to limit the quantity of foreign-made equipment that could be used to sabotage. So that is why this idea is that the over reliance on foreign imports, especially from potentially hostile countries, could undermine the nation's security infrastructure and its ability to protect itself in times of conflict. Now, the fourth important objectives of importing quotas is that it helps to balance the trade, and it also helps to stabilize their currency. That is why trade balance and currency stabilization is considered as another important objectives of imposing import quotas. So import quotas can be used as a tool to improve country's trade balance. A trade deficit occurs when the value of a nation's import exceeds the value of its export, so leading to overflow of currency. So in that case, what happened? By imposing quotas, a country can limit the number of foreign goods entering the market, thereby reducing the total value of import and helping to bring the trade balance into equilibrium. So this is particularly important for countries that faced persistent trade imbalances and rely on foreign countries to settle their external obligations. So what happens when a country trade deficit is quite large? It can result in a depletion of foreign currency reserve. This is obvious, which could put downward pressures on the national currency. So by restricting import, even quotas, the countries can conserve foreign currency reserve and stabilize its exchange rate. So this is often seen in countries with weak currencies, or those facing balance of payment crisis, where control over import is necessary to prevent further depreciation of the currencies. Now, another important objectives of imposing import quotas is to promotion of domestic innovation and technological development, which is considered as a key objective of import quotas, which is used to encourage domestic innovation and technological development. So by limiting the influx of foreign goods, especially high-tech products, a country may be able to foster a competitive environment where domestic firms are pushed to innovate, improve productivity, and invest in research and development. So the lack of foreign competition could encourage firms to develop new technologies and improve existing processes to meet consumers' demand rather than relying on import. So this is basically applicable in industries such as electronics, pharmaceutical, and biotechnologies, where import quotas can be used to incentivize local farms to invest in research and development, create new products, and build a strong innovation ecosystem. So while quotas can shield domestic farms from foreign competition in the short run, they can also be considered as a stepping stone for this farm to become more competitive on the global stage in the long term. Now, after discussing these 5 objectives, another important objectives for imposing quotas by the importing countries is to ensuring product quality and safety standard. Import quotas can be implemented to ensure that imported goods meet specific quality and safety standard. By limiting the quantity of certain import, government can better monitor the quality of product entering the country. This is particularly important for consumer goods, food products, and pharmaceutical, where the safety of imported item could have direct consequences on public health and safety. So in some cases, countries may impose quotas on goods that are known to be inferior quality or that do not meet the local safety regulation. You can also give example. For example, a country may set a quota on the certain important agricultural product that could potentially carry pest or diseases which could harm the local ecosystem or agricultural sector. So by controlling the number of import, the government can ensure that only goods that meet stringent safety and quality criteria are allowed into the market. Now, another important objective which is discussed in academic circle regarding the objective of import quota is environmental protection. Import quotas can be used to address environmental concern, particularly when the imported goods are perceived to have negative environmental impact. So let give me examples. The countries may impose quotas on importation of goods that are produced using environmentally harmful practices, such as product made with high level of carbon emission or those that involve unsustainable natural resource extraction. So by limiting the quantity of such goods entering the market, government can help to protect local ecosystem, reduce pollution, and encourage more sustainable production practices. So similarly, quotas may be used to regulate import of goods that contribute to over-exploitation of natural resources or that threaten biodiversity, such as certain endangered species or raw materials. So this can help countries to fulfill their international environmental obligation and coordinate to global effort to combat climate change and preserve national habitats. So thus, in conclusion, what we can say that import quotas serve a wide range of objectives that are central to a nation's economic, political, and strategic interest. So from, as we have given example, from protecting domestic industries and preserving jobs to ensuring national security and improving the trade balance, quota are a critical tool in managing the flow of goods into the country. So while they can have a negative impact, such as distorting market dynamics and raising consumer prices, the benefit of import quotas are evident in specific sectors where the protection of domestic industries, national interest, and social stability is paramount. So that is why government must carefully weigh both the pros and cons of implementing quotas, and they must ensure that the international community must ensure that the use of import quota is aligned with broader trade policies and international